God has a standard He expects us to live up to. He says, "Be holy, because I am holy." 1 Peter 1:16. His standard doesn't change, ever, for anyone. And that's a very good thing. In contrast, the more time passes, the faster our standards drop, so that if God didn't put a stop to it, which He'll soon be doing, it would be the worst hell on earth we can't even imagine. And He's foretold that it's going to get super bad for great tribulation. Matthew 24:21 and the last book of the Bible, Revelation, is all about it. The bomb on Hiroshima was just a preview, and if you ever read the book by John Hersey, Hiroshima, you know that was bad. It was the worst hell on earth. And it's going to get that much worse because we've been laying out the red carpet for Satan and the rest of the fallen angels. And they're not anyone's friends. They're all massive liars, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. It is not surprising, then, if his servants also masquerade as servants of righteousness. 2 Corinthians 11:14-15. As a whole, we are super naive about demonic activity. Harry Potter proved that, since it was so popular. Most are either deceived that these spirits are good or that they don't exist. Yet Satan, who's king of the fallen angels, whose name is Destroyer, according to Revelation 9:11, is the worst psychopath ever. And we are no match for him or his followers, not without Christ. Yoga is a good example. It means to be yoked with, uniting with demonic spirits. It's like mediums who invite spirits to come inside of them and speak through them. They're asking demons to totally take over their lives. So there's lots of YouTube videos of former yoga instructors who were scared straight. Stuff like magic and Harry Potter might seem entertaining, but that deception is going to become most people's worst nightmare, since broad is the way that leads to destruction. Matthew 7:13. Getting high is the same. It makes it easy for them to enter in. God warned us to be alert and of sober mind, because our enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. 1 Peter 5:8. And when you combine all of that stuff into your life, no love for the true God, getting high and drinking, and entertaining yourself with the demonic, as most seem to be doing these days, you're really asking for trouble. It's essentially what I done. I dabbled with the New Age and got high. So demons scared the mess out of me. But while they intended to harm me, God intended it for good, to accomplish what will be done through this ministry, the saving of many lives, Genesis 50:20, as I've been explaining on this playlist. He turns it around when we turn our lives over to Him, essentially throwing it back in Satan's face. Everyone, including those who reject Christ, love quoting Romans 8:28. We know that all things work together for good to them that love God. But it only works out that way when we do our part. And you can't love God without loving His Son, Jesus Christ, Yeshua. Because whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him, John 5:23. And again, the evidence pointing to the New Testament and therefore to Christ being the true God, the Son of God, God in the flesh, is over the top, overwhelming. It's a no-brainer that Jesus is God. And if you don't love Him, you don't love the Father. You do not love God. So here's the problem with pride. The LGBTQIA agenda is another one of Satan's greatest schemes. If being queer or wanting to be a different sex than how we were biologically created was genetic, there wouldn't be people who've had their breasts or penis cut off who then got convicted. And there are such people. Plenty of them. You can go to YouTube and use the keywords transgender or homosexual, comes to Christ, and listen to their testimonies. Heartache which could have been avoided by taking God seriously, since he made it very clear in the following passage. And everyone in the U.S. has had access to the Bible for basically all of U.S. history. And that's true of most of the world. We've had access to the Bible for centuries. So Romans 1 says, although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God. Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. Even their women exchange natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed shameful acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their error. When it says they knew God, it's because we've all had his law written on our hearts according to Romans 2:15. We all know right from wrong from birth. This isn't a genetic issue. Neither is it primarily a psychological one. It's sin. And Satan is running wild with it since it's so insulting to God and hurts people so deeply in many different ways. So it's not as if I'm being hateful, not going along with the LGBT agenda. It's for your protection. Through the psalmist, God revealed to us that he created our inmost being and knit us together in our mother's womb, Psalm 139:13. By lying to ourselves that we're LGBTQIA, we're telling God that he had no clue as to what he was doing. That's pretty insulting. And in the documentary Untold, Caitlyn Jenner, which came out in 2021, you see Christianity's rebellion as the root of the problem, along with the foundational problem of our own deceitful hearts. Bruce Jenner said that before deciding to have the sex change, he spoke with his pastor, asking him, and I'm quoting, "In God's eyes, how does he see me? And am I doing the right thing?" And then Jenner says, "I could never really get an answer." Yet, as already noted in Romans 1:21, the Bible is very clear as to how God views sexuality, so that Bruce should have known that he wasn't doing the right thing even without asking his pastor. But that's part of the problem. Humans are prone to idolatry, viewing someone or something as greater than God, which we use as an excuse to sin. Just like the Nazis did during the Nuremberg trials. I was just obeying orders. Like I don't have a brain of my own. And that pastor should have known the answer. You'd have to be an outrageously bad student of the Bible to not be able to answer Bruce's question. Our girls and most of their friends could have answered it correctly in first grade. Of course, you'd have to explain homosexuality and transgenderism to them, and they'd be shocked. They would have been shocked. Anyway, when Bruce Jenner stands before Christ, he, and it is a he, he's not a she, he won't be able to blame his pastor or anyone else since he has a Bible and can read. And his testimony also reveals the truth of what Jesus warned us about. That the hireling, the hired hand, the paid professional, cares not for the sheep, John 10:13. They only care for themselves, just like the Jewish leaders, the Pharisees in the Bible, 2,000 years ago. Having said all that, I am not saying that what Christians are doing with all their gay bashing is right. Not at all. God's word is right. And if we want to be right with Him, with our Maker, we'll line up our lives with His teaching. That's the wise thing to do, considering that the evidence points to Christ and that Satan is a brutal murderer. Why would you want to line up your life and defend a brutal murderer? Most people wouldn't, but because Christians have been so unfaithful for so long, and we're at the bottom of the barrel, as I've thoroughly covered on this playlist, most people around the world are defending the LGBTQIA agenda, Satan's agenda. Again, having a sex change or being homosexual is about the biggest insult we can give God. Suicide is pretty much the same. And because we're living at the bottom of the barrel of Christianity's rebellion, it's like the vortex going down the drain. There's that point of no return where everything past that line rapidly goes down. That's where we're living. Psalm 50 says, "When you did these things and I kept silent, you thought I was exactly like you." So that you see homosexuals claiming to be Christian, even though Christ is anti-homosexuality. So he says, "I kept silent, and you thought I was exactly like you. But I now arraign you and set my accusations before you. Consider this, you who forget God. Those who sacrifice thank offerings honor me." Right? By living a life worthy of the calling we have received, by showing Christ genuine gratitude. And to the blameless I will show my salvation. Through this ministry, as the latter rain comes into full swing, the Lord is no longer keeping silent and giving His elect a last-ditch effort to honor Him and experience His salvation. So if you actually love people, you'll do the right thing. You'll stand up for the truth. And the more people stand up for the truth, the easier it becomes for others to stand up for the truth. Just like it's worked with standing up for the lies, right? People were against it at first when I was a kid. Now it's the exact opposite, 40 years later. But because we're living now at the very end of this age, and God has made it very clear that that's what's going on and how much danger we're in, it won't take 40 years to turn things back around. Not for God's elect. It'll work that much faster, very fast, as I covered on the previous video of this playlist. Anyway, the LGBT agenda parallels what it would be like if I were to divorce my husband. Since God led me to marry him, I'd be saying, "Lord, you had no clue as to what you were doing. I'll take it from here." And in many ways, I could easily say that because my husband we're not one in Christ, not even close, even though he's born again. But being honest about God's leading and His word, I know that He gave me the best husband for the job. None of the others, for example, would have funded this ministry. They would have divorced me in a heartbeat, no doubt, right? Because even born-again Christians can't stand Christ today. I also get it that in the end, it will definitely have worked out for the best for both of us. I'm sure he would love a divorce. In fact, why hasn't he divorced me? The only thing I can think of is because he is born again and has enough faith to not sin against God that way. He also doesn't like conflict, is very anti-conflict, will do almost anything to avoid conflict. Anyway, he's the nicest man I've ever known. He's just a bad Christian, since that's all that's out there. We've all been very bad Christians, myself included, as God is my witness. And I do give examples throughout my ministry, but I'm not going to focus on that right now. While God's standard is the same for everyone, there are several scriptures mentioning the book of life which make it clear that during this present evil age, God is focusing on some people, the elect. And the following three passages are key. Revelation 13:8 says, "All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life." And Revelation 17:8 says, "The inhabitants of the earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world will be astonished when they see the beast." So these people's names who were not written in the book weren't written from the creation of the world. They were never written in the book of life. And Revelation 3:5 says, "The one who is victorious will be dressed in white. I will never blot out the name of that person from the book of life." So from the creation of the world, before any of us was even born, God did not write some names in the book of life, according to Revelation 13:8 and 17:8. But he did write other names in the book of life, according to Revelation 3:5, since he's going to blot them out. And we know which names were and weren't written in the book of life because of Romans 9:22-23. It says, "What if God, willing to show his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much long suffering the vessels of wrath fitted to destruction, that he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy, which he had afore prepared unto glory"? What if? It's one of the reasons Jesus said, "No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws them," John 6:44. During this present age, God is drawing the elect, the vessels of mercy which he had afore prepared unto glory, Romans 9:23. But if they don't take Jesus seriously and become born again, as he says you must be in John 3:7, for example, he will blot out those names from the book of life, according to Revelation 3:5, right? The one who is victorious is the one who becomes born again, and to be really victorious, we want to be a born again close follower of Christ, as the New Testament clearly teaches. And because of the guy who died next to Jesus, to whom he said, "Today you will be with me in paradise," we know it's not over until our last breath. On top of that, considering that he told Peter to forgive 70 times 7, meaning as long as a person repents, keep forgiving them, we know that's his standard for us and for himself, since he's not a hypocrite. So let's say you're in your 60s and have consistently rejected Christ your entire life, so that he blotted your name out of the book. Speaking of the elect, God will write it back into the book if you now take him seriously because of his 70 times 7 forgiving nature. We serve a forgiving God. That point was made abundantly clear at the cross. And even before that, we're supposed to forgive, because Jesus said, I'm not looking at the verse, I'll put it up on the screen, if you don't forgive, your Father will not forgive you. So something happened the day before yesterday in our family, and it's very tempting to not forgive that person, right? And yet I have to forgive them. I have to forgive them, right? And I want to, but in our sinful nature, in my sinful nature, I don't want to. I want to hold a grudge. And so the way to get past it, and get past it quickly, is to admit it, that I'm angry, right? so unfair, so wrong, blah, blah, blah. Help me forgive them. And before you know it, you're praying for them and you've forgiven them. It's simple. But if we hold the grudge, if we don't do that, we end up nurturing the grudge and feeling more and more self-righteous because they were wrong and because we're sinful. And so people will hold grudges their entire lives and go as far as committing murder to get back at them, which only hurts them, just as Satan wants. Well, it doesn't just hurt them, it hurts both of them, just as Satan wants, like killing two birds with one stone. And we are those birds. So forgiveness is God's standard for us. And he's not a hypocrite, so it's his standard for himself as well. And all inhabitants of the earth started off worshiping the beast because he represents Satan, who's the ruler of this world, according to John 12:31, for example. And we have to become born again, according to John 3:7. Those who rise to the first resurrection will be pleasantly surprised by some who are there, since they came to Christ with their very last breath, like the guy hanging on the cross next to Jesus. We'll also be surprised at who's not there. All those professing Christians who weren't actually born again. So while becoming born again isn't complicated, it does require being honest, which is hard for hearts that are deceitful above all things, which is what God has revealed they are, warned us they are in Jeremiah 17:9. But it's not impossible, right? It's not impossible to be honest and to overcome our sinful nature because of what Jesus did on the cross. We just need to be honest. That's it. Because the truth is what sets us free. And we've all been sold as slaves to sin. Because as I've explained on this playlist, and we're told in Deuteronomy 13:3, this whole thing, this whole life has been about God testing us to see whether we love him or not, love our Creator or not. In fact, proving to us that we don't, but we can and we should. And the way to do it is by being honest. That's the first step. Then we apply the truth to our lives. So Bruce Jenner, if he were to be honest and get right with God, he would admit the truth that he has been miserable and transition back as a man, confessing, yeah, that's actually what I am. I was created as a man, I am a man, I'm happier as a man, and would not promote Satan's agenda. And so if you look at the dates for when it was posted that he was experiencing sex change regret, and the date of the publication of that documentary, Untold, you see that the regret came first, and yet you're promoting this agenda, helping people become miserable. Because not only is the human heart desperately wicked, the love of money corrupts. And we all know that the richer you are, seems to be the more love of money you have. Like you can't satisfy that craving, just like it is with food. Even when we're not hungry, we stuff ourselves, some of us do. Same with drugs. We want to quit, but we keep getting high or doing heroin, whatever. Same thing. Sold as slaves to sin. And there's only one way to free ourselves. Admit the truth and turn to Christ.